Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about Agile analytics in regulatory compliance for financial services firms. I'll start with a quote and an analogy that I really like. Mark Livonian of Promontory Financial Group said in an interview with MoneyBeat last year that the regulatory environment for financial services firms, and particularly for the banks, is like doing a high jump in the dark. You clear the bar, and then it gets raised a little bit for the next jump, but the banks can't see exactly how high the bar has been reset. So you jump as high as you can. And then it happens again next year. You regroup and jump as high as you can again. So you end up applying this massive effort to reach essentially an unattainable goal. This got me thinking, why is it so hard? If we take CCAR as an example, for the banks that are required to submit capital plans to the Fed under the CCAR scheme, they have teams of dozens or even hundreds of people who spend essentially all of their time just on this reporting effort. At the end of that effort every year, they end up with a 12,000-page report or capital plan that they submit to the Fed. The Fed then asks for changes and adjustments, which those teams then struggle to complete. They resubmit, and this year's CCAR effort is essentially forgotten. Then the regulators reset the bar a little higher, but you can't be sure exactly how high, and the entire effort starts all over again. I think that this type of effort is such a struggle in the current environment for most firms for a few reasons. First, you need to be agile in order to do this the right way. And current processes within most firms are just not agile. They're used to using a strongly IT-driven waterfall approach for pulling together all of the data and applying all the analytic logic that's necessary to compile all of the results that need to go into these reports. What I mean by waterfall approach is that the business or compliance teams spend a lot of time up front gathering, documenting, and refining requirements, and then those requirements are submitted to a disconnected technical team who then spend a long time in development work towards those requirements, only to deliver something maybe months later that meets most of the requirements that were defined up front. But what happens if the requirements have changed in the meantime? Contrast this with an agile approach that offers continuous delivery of value and results, along with many points at which direction can change if the underlying requirements have changed. Secondly, in most cases, the tools that exist in the current environment to do the analysis required for these efforts do not lend themselves to this agile approach. Instead, they require highly specialized, computer science-like skill sets that force organizations to rely on a relatively small number of bottlenecked resources to produce the solution. This leads directly to the use of the waterfall approach and introduces plenty of other stumbling blocks and disconnects to the entire process. This causes a lot of frustration. The third reason, then, is that, unfortunately, the analytics teams in most organizations solve this by everyone using his or her favorite de facto analytics tools, things like Excel and Access, just to get the job done. The use of these tools further complicates the situation by making things inconsistent, unreliable, opaque, and in many cases, not reusable. So then I was thinking, what if it didn't matter how high the regulators set the bar? There must be a better way to approach this. And there is. Tools do exist to enable an agile analytic environment underneath these efforts, which really buys you three things. One, you can respond more quickly to changes in the regulatory environment or other analytic requirements. So when you're finished with this year's scenarios, you can modify things much more easily and quickly to apply them directly to next year's scenarios. Secondly, it improves overall the accuracy, consistency, and transparency in the way that people are analyzing the data that goes into these reports and compliance activities. And thirdly, it allows you to continuously deliver value that is reusable, not only for regulatory compliance activities, but also for other endeavors across the firm, things like operational analyses or other types of risk-related analytics. So what does this look like? Many types of analysis use the same data and the same logic as regulatory compliance analytics. For example, anti-money laundering analytics, or customer experience analytics, or data quality initiatives that may not have anything to do with regulatory compliance directly. There's an endless list of business applications that can be created much more efficiently using this agile methodology. If you can change slightly the way that you think about approaching these problems, you can do things much faster, much more flexibly, and at the same time with much higher quality. It's really about building out a capability for the agile development of analytic applications. This includes putting in place the right tools and enabling the right methodology for allowing people to be much more efficient, effective, and consistent in the way that they tackle analytic tasks. Doing this effectively leads directly to the continuous delivery of results and value that can benefit many different analytic and business initiatives right across the organization.